figure.
And it was also formed with Alfonso Taft, whose son later became the President of the United States.
And it's important to remember, folks, that these people metamorphosize themselves. They're always changing. The Eastern liberal establishment of today, known as the Council on Foreign Relations, the same people who made the blueprint for the United Nations, got their money from none other than the opium trade. Mm-hmm. So, you know, who's running the drug war? It's the Illuminists. You got to know that, folks.
Yeah, because Russell went on, he became state legislator in 1846. So, you know, they have their hands in the politics, they have their hands in business, they have their hands in
producing money. That's the key.
You know, and money, you know, it's something that we use. Like I said in the past, we're not farmers, we can't go out and eat our money.
No, we know that Prescott Bush, I think in the,
yes,
second decade of the 1900s was a member, somewhere around there. And then I guess Senior.
Herbert, he's a member.
Right. And so what we got to recognize, folks, is that, you know, the Skull and Bones organization, as we mentioned earlier, its equivalent in Britain is the, help me?
Fabian?
No. That's a good one. No.
Thule. No, that's Germany.
That's where we're going.
The Thule Society, right.
Cecil Rhodes Scholarship. Okay, in Britain it's the equivalent to Skull and Bones. And if we go back in time a little bit further, you know, let's talk a little bit about the Thule Society. Now, the Thule Society was the occult, philosophical backbone of the SS, believe it or not, folks. And see, we don't look at the Bush's family and we don't equivocate to them as Hitler. You know, we don't say, oh, geez, you know, don't look like Hitler and don't seem to be doing what Hitler's done. But what did Hitler do? I find it a very interesting parallel that he would decide to, in this final solution, begin to wipe out all these Jews. And then here we are under the New World Order since 9/11. Everybody knows that our government is no longer operating on the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, probably since not World War II. But anyway, we recognize that, geez, we're involved with another war. And geez, well, the United Nations got put together in 1945, folks. And who put that together? The United Nations. You know, obviously our government didn't accept the League of Nations, which that's what I said. People, you got to watch these people. They metamorphosize. When people don't accept them for what they are, they metamorphosize. Because before it was the United Nations, it was the League of Nations. And before that, the League of Just Men. And so once the United Nations got formulated in 1945, and a few years later, you have the reestablishment of the nation of Israel. Now, think about it. Hitler couldn't wipe out all the Jews, so what do? You give them a piece of property and surround them by their enemies. You know? And so what are we doing over there today? It's undignified, but anyway, it's the way of the world. And so let's talk a little bit more about the Thule Society. We got some interesting things. The type of rituals that they were involved with. You got anything on that there? Page 180, folks. Just so you know, we're reading from a fine text here that we got a copy from a fine gentleman named David J. Smith out of Texas. He's got a fine ministry down there, and he speaks the truth, exposing Satan's lies, the history of God's people, and the coming New World Order. Indeed, folks. So,
right, in the Thule Society, what was it called? The Brotherhood of Death Society. And it's the same thing, the insignia that we have here. This was their insignia.
Yep.
And you would also find that on Hitler's SS death squad.
Quite right, mate.
So, you know, this is not something that we're actually making up these little things and say, yeah, this is just, you know, one of them fictitious organizations. No, these did and do exist.
Right, this isn't propaganda that the Illuminati would lay on you to make you stupid and dumb you down.
You know, when communism fell in 89, you know, those who were running the country at the time, their philosophies didn't all of a sudden change. They were kind of overthrown economically, so to speak.
I hear you. I totally hear
you. You know, it just didn't stop. The Depression, you know, all these people didn't just run out of work. The money disappeared. There were still plenty of people willing to do work, and they would have done it for just a loaf of bread. So let's see. The German Brotherhood of the Death Society is also known as the Thule Society. Now, who founded that? This guy named Eckhart. Right. Well, that's one of those things that's up for debate.
Right. Madame Blavatsky. We've talked about Aleister Crowley in the past. Madame Blavatsky, well-known occultist among people who are interested in the occult and the history of the occult, and you know how these ideas have, you know, worked out into history.
Right. Now, one of the things that kind of helps contribute to understanding why Hitler went after the Jews and other lesser races is because of Madame Blavatsky's philosophy or belief that there were 7 races of spiritual, well, there were 7 races in general. You had the Jews being the lowest of the 7, being the most ape-like. Now, remember, this is Madam Vlasky. I'm very much a constitutionalist. I don't buy any of that crap. And then you had blacks as number 2. Then you had Asians as number 3. You had Caucasians. Most of the rest of Europe is number 4. Number 5, you had the Austrians and Aryans. And then number 6 and number 7 were spirits. They were like angels and demons or something like that. But see, this was how Hitler had perceived people, that there were, superior versus inferior beings based on this scale, just like he went through.
And where did they get this information? But through rituals. Now, when we think of rituals, we think, oh, let's go to church, and a Catholic, let's take the sacrament, all right?
Right, stages of the cross or something like that.
This means to these people in the Thule Society, you got to understand that they were Satanists practicing black magic, okay, folks? And this means that they were solely concerned with raising their consciousness by means of rituals to the awareness of evil and non-human intelligence in the universe, and with achieving means of communication with these intelligence, aliens, or whatever you want to call them. Mm-hmm. It's pretty crazy. Is it really?
Right. It goes on to say rituals allow demonic power to flow through the participant.
You'll become a channel for one of these.
If you look at Hitler a little bit, if you read some of his more or read about Hitler and some of the more say left type of books written about him, Hitler and the occult, those kind of things, you have eyewitness accounts of people talking believe that he was actually demonic possessed. I know Melissa Scott, Dr. Jean Scott's now former wife, pastor of our church. She was saying that the same demon that possessed Hitler was the one who possessed Nero when he was burning all the Christians and killing all the Christians a couple thousand years ago. But many people have witnessed the way when Hitler would go into a speech that he would have this energy and a fluidness and a confidence about him that he didn't normally possess until he got up in front of people to speak.
Now, go ahead.
And then afterwards, he was so physically drained, like the demon that was giving him energy left him.
Well, before we get back into Skull and Bones and before we leave Hitler, all right, I just wanted to read that thing about there. Eckhart, he was...
His final act.
Yeah. Well, Eckhart was someone who, brought Hitler up into this sense of consciousness through the rituals. And what did he have to say there? You got that one out there? Yep. His final act was to initiate
Hitler into a monstrous, sadistic, magical ritual after which he was sexually impotent. Hitler's impotency had a deep psychological foundation. He knew sexual fulfillment only through the extreme of sadism and machoism.
Now, the reason that we're even bringing this up, folks, okay, Anton LaVey started the Church of Satan out in San Francisco in 1966. And there's a long list of very important people who were involved with that church. We won't get into that right now. That's the whole project for another program. But from Anton LaVey's book, Satanic Rituals, which is an actual companion to the Satanic Bible, on page 55 there's a quote that says, "The ceremony of rebirth takes place in a large coffin." And this is similar to the coffin symbolism that is found in most lodge, meaning lodge. What do we got over here?
Right, that's this was the graduating class.
And the point, go ahead.
That's something a little bit different. Haven't quite gotten to that yet, but I want to definitely get back to the Skull and Bones and some of their
agenda. And that's
where
we're going with the coffin, because it says here, make no mistake about it, any organization which utilizes this coffin ritual to simulate rebirth is practicing Satanism, whether they know it or not, including Skull and Bones. Now, let's talk about Skull and Bones and their rituals and their beliefs and how they correlate to the Thule Society.
They're pretty much the exact same thing. I've actually seen from CBS News, they had a night camera vision that snuck in a certain angle. They were able to actually get a little sneak in at some of the rituals, and they were doing something in a coffin.
Yep.
And it wasn't, they couldn't quite show it all, obviously, but it very much implied that they were doing these ritual sex acts, that they divulged deep secrets about themselves.
Well, let's go right about it, right here. Remember, established in 1833, folks, all right, 15 juniors from Yale get tapped each year, which means they bring in 15 into their fold.